Welcome to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. Are you a goofball that loves Giants football? If so, sit back and relax. Except you, that person driving. Sit up and keep your eyes on the road. Your ears, though, can still listen as we talk about the team that both excites and frustrates us so much. And now, here are your goofball hosts, Drew and Rob.
Welcome, fellow goofballs, to Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. I am Drew, joined as always by...
And me, Rob. Let's talk about those RBs.
Arby's, and not to be confused with this place that sells fast food meat sandwiches.
We got the meats.
Listen, the best thing about them is the curly fries. Those things are freaking awesome. Like, seriously.
We got the running backs.
We do have the running backs. And this is such a storied position for Giants history overall that it's nice because this is not one of those groups where you go, okay, I need one or two more. It's more like, how do I fit this one or this one in? It's that kind of position for us. So we definitely got a lot of great players to talk about today. We didn't even have a chance to do an honorable mention because it's like we had so many people. We had to put we had to do a full top 10 of running backs even instead of doing the top 5 like we did last episode there with the quarterbacks. We've definitely had more really good running backs than we have quarterbacks, that's for sure. So, all right. So before we begin the show, we do have to let you guys know that this episode is sponsored by Deb Ellis here. Appreciate you, Deb. Thank you very much. Rob, why don't you tell the fine folks here how would she become a sponsor of this show?
Oh, she went to buymeacupofcoffee.com/2giantgoofballs, but instead of buying some coffee, she bought some beer.
She bought some beer.
It looks like water. Beer? I have to go to work tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, I know the feeling. But Deb, much appreciated. I'm going to start a new tradition, I think, as well with this Buy Me a Cup of Coffee because we really appreciate people that sponsor the show. And don't get me wrong, we appreciate everybody who listens, comments, everything in general. But the people who have been sponsoring the show are going above and beyond, and we want to do something to show them some gratitude here. So I'm going to make a new rule. I'm making this arbitrarily, too, by the way. I did not tell Rob about this at all. He's probably a little nervous now.
Sons of a gun.
Yeah, that's what I do. We're going to go ahead and send anyone who sponsors a show a free 2 Giant Goofballs sticker. So all you have to do is after you sponsor the show, you go to our Facebook Messenger there, Facebook page, and hit the Messenger button, and go ahead and send us your address if you're comfortable. If you're not, I get it. Trust me, I wouldn't be giving my address out necessarily to weirdos on the internet either. We're definitely weirdos. But like I said, we are happy to send them out. It's a way of saying thank you. For those who can't see the screen here, let me move my mic a little bit here. You can see there's one right next to my head. As I move my head, get closer to the mic again. I got one right in the wall there behind me. There we go. So like I said, we're going to start doing that as well as a way of saying thank you. It's definitely appreciated there. All righty. So we got to kick off the list. But Deb, we're going to talk about someone specifically that you asked us to talk about in this episode. So if you're in, hit in the comments section so we know you're in, please. If not in yet, obviously you can't. We'll get to you when you do pop in.
Just make sure you say hi.
Yes.
On a rewatch.
All righty. Let's start off with number 10. And for those who have been watching this story, this podcast for a while, know that Rob has just an amazing story to talk about this gentleman on here.
It's fantastic.
But before we get to that, the sponsor of the show, Deb, is in, and she wanted us to talk about somebody who, let's be honest, without her, he would not be mentioned in this episode whatsoever. The great Ron Dane.
Who plays number 25.
She was being facetious, but I don't care. You asked, you get it. That's the way this works here in the show. So obviously, Ron Dane was one of the biggest prospects when he was drafted. He was actually the 11th overall pick in the 2000 NFL draft. was a historically good running back there. With I don't have that in front of me. Was it Wisconsin? I believe he's a Wisconsin Badger.
I believe so. He
I
badgered a
believe
lot.
so as well.
A
So
lot of Giant fans.
he spent a total of 4 years with the Giants overall. In those years, he kind of got worse each year. 770 yards first year, 690 the second, 428 the third, down to 179 yards in the last one. Never ever made it above 4 yards an attempt, which he was at that cusp where that was starting to become like the thing. You had to be 4 yards. Obviously, again, keep in mind in the olden days there, it was kind of like, oh, you got 3.5 yards, 3 yards. And then they go into Rob's theory of, oh, well, you run it 4 times and you're good. And
3.5. That
so
was his time.
she just confirmed Wisconsin. She also says Thunder and Lightning, baby, which, yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of running back tandems over the years that I've seen that kind of Thunder and Lightning thing. Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs who said that. But when I hear Thunder and Lightning with running backs, I think of this man we're talking about here, Ron Dane, being Thunder, accompanied by the Lightning of one Tiki Barber, a Tiki torch, you could say.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
North Carolina.
I mean, listen, he was a big bust. Let's be honest. 10th overall pick. But I think he gets too much hate. I really do. Because in the end, he still had, as a Giant, let's see, his total yards here was, total yards was 2,000 yards in 4 seasons. So he averaged 500 yards a season. So it wasn't like he couldn't play football at all. He just was nowhere near the player that you expect to get out of a 10th overall pick.
Yeah, I was about to say, if he was 210, it would be different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alrighty. On to the actual top 10. On to the top. Let's see. I get next comment here from Ray Shatuk. I want to say is the last name. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He says, hey, guys, not the greatest number-wise, but Brandon Jacobs was a tank and bleeds blue. Ray, you hold on to that thought, good sir.
Yeah.
You hold on to that thought. I'm telling you, he's coming up. Number 10 here. First off, Rob's buddy, the man he met. And Rob will regale us once again with the story of how he met Otis Anderson. But he'll do at the end. He will do at the end of the Otis Anderson segment.
The greatest story.
Again. This is the greatest story.
Told since Golden Mish.
This is not the greatest story. It is but a tribute.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Otis Anderson was originally the 8th overall pick of the St. Louis Cardinals back in the day. And no, not baseball. The Cardinals used to play also in St. Louis and football as well. In 1979, he was traded to the Giants mid-season in 1986 because, quite frankly, everybody thought he was done. He was washed up. He got a ton of injuries, wasn't the player he used to be anymore. So he ends up playing for us, though, from 86 to 92. That's pretty good time period for a guy who was supposedly washed up. Overall, on his career, 2,274 rushing yards, 35 touchdowns, 567 receiving yards. 1,000-yard rushing season with us. Now, you might ask,
excuse me,
why would a guy with just 2,274 rushing yards be on our top 10? He sneaks on because he is a Super Bowl MVP. I'm sorry, you get a Super Bowl MVP, you end up in the top 10. I don't care what else you did. It could be the only game you play as a Giant. You're getting in. Right there. 2-time Super Bowl champ overall. And the guy was the consummate professional who always had somebody else with him in the backfield. So that's part of the stat issue with him, keep in mind as well. Whether it was Joe Morris for most of it or towards the end last year with Rodney Hampton, he had other people that had to also run the ball as well. So he was more of a running back by committee approach.
Yeah, a little dual threat, if you will.
Exactly. Now,
he wasn't the head of the demon, if you will.
On his career, to let people know what kind of running back he was prior to us getting him, because it's one hell of a career, it really is.
Yeah.
10,273 rushing yards, 81 touchdowns, 3,062 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. He had 6 1,000 rushing seasons overall, 2 Pro Bowls, and one-time All-Pro. So, yeah, one hell of a career. So, obviously, we got to back a lot of that out because a lot of that was with the Cardinals there. But still, as a Giant, he has to go down as one of the best ever because of the fact that he was a Super Bowl MVP, because of the fact that he played with other great running backs as well and had to share the backfield. Because I guarantee you, if he didn't, one of the two things would have happened. He would have got injured again, or he would have a hell of a lot more yards. A hell of a lot more yards. So, number 10, Otis Anderson. And, of course, before we move on to number 9, Rob, why don't you regale us?
See that?
Why don't you regale us with your story? Oh, we got the picture this time. Last time we told the story, we weren't even live streaming yet. So
I know. I had to do it.
So that's why I'm saying we got to share it again, because people may not have been, listening back then. They might be watchers, not listeners. So, Rob, why don't you regale us again with your story of Otis Anderson?
My awesome storytelling skills.
This is the greatest. I'm telling you guys, if you have been waiting for the greatest story that you ever heard in your entire life, this is it.
I'm gonna come back on the backstory a little bit, but
go for it.
I work for a company. I helped out this one customer of ours. We go to the site, help him up, and then I tell this guy, I'm a big Giants fan because I had a Giants Lancer. I would wear Giants memorabilia, and the guy's like, "I really help all your help, with the company. Like, you really improved everything." It's like, actually, I'm fans with I'm buddies with LT and Otis Anderson's. Like, why don't you take an LT autographed jersey? I was like,
wait a minute, this wasn't even the story last time, that part.
No, but this is how it all builds up.
I know, wow. The story gets better each time you tell it. I once caught a fish this big.
This big. So he gives it to me. It was, the gentleman, the other guy that I know that's about your height.
Okay, yes.
Way girthier.
Wow.
Hey, listen, he's got 150 pounds on you.
He's 400 pounds?
Close to.
Wow.
Exactly. That's part of the story. So I've been friends with this kid since I was in the 4th grade, and his birthday's coming up, and it was his 30th at the time. Then. Yeah, it was only 300 pounds. Yeah. And I was like, it's my buddy's 30th birthday, and I didn't know what to get him, but this is the perfect gift. And this guy looks at me. His name's Robbie. He goes, "You want to give away an LT autographed jersey?" I was like, "It's my best friend, and I'm an LT fan, but that's his favorite player of all time, and he collects autographs, and he doesn't have it, and it's an autographed jersey. Like, I can't. Like, I have to. Like, this is perfect." He went, "There's still good people in this world." He's like, "Here, let me get you something." Comes back with another LT jersey, autographed. Gives me like 3 or 4 pictures. It was like 4 pictures autographed by LT. And he goes, "Oh, by the way, Otis Anderson's coming by the shop in 2 weeks for autographs. Don't worry, I paid for your passes. Come in." So I get there, and my buddy, who also is humongous.
Yeah.
I hope let's blur him here.
Too late.
I walk in, and Otis is like, "Who the hell brought this guy? Where does he play football?" And then, of course, I'm a wrestler, and instead of taking the pass from my right by going like this, I went like this. And he was like, "Who the hell taught you football?" Because I did the arms wrong, because ball hits this arm. You got to go up this way, catch it. And I did it. And then he autographed another picture for me, and that's the story. Gilgamesh.
This is the greatest story.
Gilgamesh won the day.
Alrighty, on that note, let's get on to number 9. Ron Johnson. And I gotta say, this is one of the guys that you don't hear talked about very often in Giants lore, so to speak. It's a guy that I feel like time has kind of forgotten to a certain degree. So I'm glad we get the chance to talk about him, because I'll be honest, I knew the name. I knew some of what he did. I didn't know as much as I know now doing the research on for this show, and it's something I'm kind of, like I said, I'm really glad we get these opportunities to learn about some of these players like that. I don't like for Giants history to go to the wayside. We've been around for quite a long time here, quite a long time.
I mean, he also was drafted when my dad was like 9.
I don't care.
So just saying, it's okay if you have a lackluster memory.
No. I want to know. These are the important people.
I was going to say, you shouldn't. Yeah. You need to know the history.
So 20th overall pick in 1969 by the Cleveland Browns. After one season, he's traded to the Giants as part of the return for wide receiver Homer Jones, who obviously is a name that most Giant fans will recognize. And he was very glad when he got traded to us because the Browns were using him as a fullback, not a running back. He wanted to be a full-on running back. So he ended up playing for us from 1970 to 1975, so 6 years there. During that time frame, he was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 1-time All-Pro, led the NFL in rush attempts in 1970 and 1972. In those 6 years, 3,836 rushing yards, 33 touchdowns, 1,813 receiving yards, 15 receiving TDs. 2-time 1,000-yard rusher. He was the first Giant ever to eclipse 1,000 yards. We did that in 1970, his very first season with the New York Giants. So, yeah.
Look what I could do.
Like I said, a guy you don't hear very much about in Giants history whatsoever.
I mean, he made Giant history. As
we get Connor chiming in. What's up, Connor? He says, I was born in 1969, and I'm pretty good at doing 69, I've been told. I'm sorry, Connor, that they lied to you.
It takes two to tango, buddy.
And that's 69 it does, that's for sure. So, but again, a guy that I encourage Giant fans who maybe aren't familiar with the name to look up some of the tape on the guy and see, a little more about him. Because again, this is a guy that I feel has kind of fallen to the wayside of Giants history to a certain degree. And we never want to see that happen with all-time greats, especially guys who really took a hit on every single goddamn play. Because that's what running backs do. It doesn't matter what the play is. If you hand them the ball, someone's going to hit them at some point, probably. Someone. Unless they get a touchdown. Kudos to them.
Even sometimes then.
And I got to wonder if part of it is because of the fact that we talked about this in the last episode. We talked about quarterbacks, is that he played when the Giants were, frankly, a horrible team.
Yeah, pretty much.
But we also talked about how last time that the Giant quarterbacks had trouble getting it going because they had a horrible offensive line. Well, guess who else is affected by a horrible offensive line?
Some running backs.
The running back. And yet there's a guy still getting it done. So kudos Ron Johnson.
Imagine what you could have done with the good offensive line.
Seriously, I mean that's led the league in rushing attempts twice with an offensive line that we talked about not being very good. I mean that's
very lackluster.
Yeah. So, alrighty, numero 8, and I think most Giant fans remember this name, the Ocho, ESPN, the Ocho. Ahmad Bradshaw, 7th round pick in 2007. Probably one of the best late round draft picks in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
7th round wise, at least I should say. 7th round wise. There's not a lot of 7th round guys that come out and
really this. How many 7th round
I like how you're doing
running backs? Oh, how many 7th round running backs have got 2 Super Bowls on?
There's not a lot.
Take Tom Brady out of the equation. He doesn't count.
It's like I said, a 7th round pick. You don't see that very often where they have any kind of career really, but to have a career that you're talked about as one of the best at the position. I mean, that's just not very often at all. So yeah, got to give them kudos for overcoming that, because keep in mind, it's not just that they got to overcome, the issue of him having an issue with talent or something with his play. It's the coaches. Like if you're a 7th round pick, you're not expected to do anything. So they don't give you a lot of opportunity sometimes. You got to earn that opportunity on the field.
And he proved he earned that spot.
Yeah, he got it. He's got to earn that spot. That's for sure. And he did. So overall played with the Giants from 2007 to 2012. Also did play 3 seasons with the Colts afterwards from 13 to 15. He was a 2-time Super Bowl champ. His numbers, and again, these numbers I'm giving you guys is just the numbers with the Giants here. 4,232 yards, 32 rushing touchdowns, 1,087 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. had 2 1,000-yard seasons. So here's another guy that honestly, I was almost kind of flip-flopping him and Ron Johnson at the beginning. I was kind of like, they're so close, and Ron Johnson played with a bad line. Bradshaw played with a good line. And I think in the end, what actually made me pick Bradshaw over Johnson for number 8, not the two Super Bowls. Not the 2 Super Bowls. Actually, what I was thinking was the fact that he had a split time with somebody else. Bradshaw was never really the only guy in the backfield. There was another gentleman back there who we might talk about in a moment.
Maybe not.
Yeah. So again, probably one of the best 7th round picks ever in the history of the NFL. Definitely the best 7th round pick I can think of for the Giants. Yeah. I mean, there's been other picks later on. I mean, like Jesse Armstead, the linebacker, was I think like an 11th round pick or something like that back when they used to have like 30 pit rounds and stuff like that. But as far as like modern day, you know, that's pretty impressive there. So kudos Ahmad Bradshaw, who later on, I should say, also became quite the receiving weapon for the Colts his last couple of years as well. Was much more of a, you know, almost like an Austin Eckler kind of running back too. So
yeah,
guy extended his career as a smart player. And I think I will always remember him overall for when he almost scored a touchdown, turned around to stop himself and turning a touchdown in the Super Bowl. And I want to say this is the 2nd Super Bowl. And he ended up looking like he was about to take a dump in the end zone and just fell in.
Yeah. He was trying to run the clock down.
Yeah. But I will always remember that play because it just, I was like, what is he? I'm like, he's like sitting down.
They needed to keep the butt stop, not the butt slide.
Yeah, he got it. He got it in by the gluteus maximus.
Yeah, by the crack of a hair.
Oh yes. As Connor also asked, said, "Do we talk about Rob Carpenter yet?" I was late getting in. He was a tough guy. Actually, he was going to be number 11 for us if we had continued on. Rob Carpenter, who was the guy we got from the Oilers, there was very close to beating out into the list here, but Otis Anderson, because of that Super Bowl MVP, he's got to take the cake there because Carpenter had better numbers with the Giants and he had them, and I believe less years even too, but that Super Bowl MVP, can't get past that. Alrighty, so on to number 7. And Ray, remember I said hold that thought? I said hold that thought. Here he is. Brandon Jacobs, 4th round pick in 2005, played with the Giants from 2005 to 2011, then played with the Niners in 12, went back to the Giants in 2013 for his final season. Another 2-time Super Bowl champ because him and Bradshaw wore that winning combo in the backfield. He is the Giants' all-time rushing TD leader. No one has had more. Not even some of the bigger names that are probably like, wait a minute, isn't it so-so? No, it's not. It's Brandon Jacobs. That was his bread and butter. That man could score into the end zone. He was the best.
Put him in the red zone. Boom.
And it's funny. I remember when he first got in, he was a guy who Coughlin would like throw fits over him because he would like run standing up. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't getting his pads low and doing that. And they fixed that. And he became an absolutely amazing, you know, short yardage back in the end. And was a guy that really didn't get a lot of experience in college, too, because he came with fresh legs overall. So if I remember correctly, and I didn't do the research in this one before, so someone feel free in the comments section to correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll let everybody know. But I believe he played his last season with Illinois, and before that played at Auburn with Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown, where he was like a 3-headed monster at running back at that place. So, yeah, didn't come with a lot of miles, you know, coming off the tread there into the NFL, and got a nice, decent, long career out of it, and became, like I said, our all-time rushing TDs leader in the end. So his Giants career, 5,087 rushing yards. So you would actually think Bradshaw probably has more yards, but no, Jacobs actually had more yards than him. 60 touchdowns. We talked about Bradshaw before, 32, 60 for Jacobs. 743 receiving yards and 4 receiving TDs, which, to be honest, is higher than I expected it to be. That big guy was not the guy you were throwing the ball to if you could avoid it.
He was not the football player in the ballerina costume.
Yeah, he was not that guy. He was not, he was not the player. He wasn't the Marshall Faulk kind of running back there. He was definitely the I'm gonna beat the hell out of you kind of football player. And I think that's why a lot of Giant fans liked him so much. He just ran it up the A gap nonstop and kept on taking the hits over and over again. And
I mean, I think that also helped elevate, our last pick, Bradshaw over here, because he wasn't that guy.
Nope.
So, like, you put them in I formation, it went a big way.
Yeah. And keep in mind, too, the guy was 6'4", 264 pounds, guys. So when we say short yardage back, he could have played like guard or tackle in college at that point. But no, he was just a big beefy guy who had decent speed, had good vision, and didn't mind taking the hit.
And strong legs to keep himself upright.
Exactly, especially once he got that form down, that Coughlin finally beat that into his head. He was, like I said, the best short yardage back you could ever pretty much ask for. So next up on the list, number 6.
Kicking it old school.
Oh, we're going really old school with this one, guys. Alex Webster. And no, he was not that adorable child in that 80s cartoon. That was a different Webster. 11th round pick.
Well, I go to this guy when I have to look up a word that I don't know the meaning.
Oh, that's the Webster's dictionary.
Gotcha. Wow.
So we talked about late round picks before. 11th round pick this guy was in 1953. Yeah, we're kicking it old school right now. He was
before the NFL was the NFL.
He was such. Oh, it was still the NFL, just still at the AFL.
Yeah. All right. Whatever.
Pre-merger.
Yes. Pre-Super Bowl era.
So he was such a low prospect coming out of college that he had to spend his first 2 years in Montreal playing for the CFL. Goes to the Giants, who obviously still
don't you know
right, in 1955, and ends up playing from 1955 to 1964. He also was a coach for the Giants. He was a head coach for the Giants from 1969 to 1973, which is really crazy if you think about it. So 5 years after he's done playing,
he was right to coaching, and coaches Ron Johnson.
That's like, could you imagine if, like, let's say another year or two, Eli Manning became the head coach of the New York Giants? Like, that's the timeline we're talking about. To put that in perspective, like.
And who came from Cleveland? Who we already talked about?
Yep,
Ron Johnson.
And he was his head coach there. He was also the UPI NFL Coach of the Year in 1970 for the Giants too, as well. So I got to include that because we will probably eventually do a show for you guys on top coaches for the Giants, and he will not make the list probably. 29-40-1 overall as a head coach.
Womp, womp.
Not the worst, don't get me wrong. Like he's Ben McAdoo, but
that's the name that will not be spoken.
Two-time Pro Bowler, one-time NFL champ, the 1956 NFL championship team that we had there. Another Jersey boy too. Also, he was from Kearney.
Oh,
so yeah. So those you like Rob and I from local Jersey. There, he's local to us there for his career.
Kearney didn't have to go far to East Rutherford.
Yeah, no, I mean you're talking right in that neck of the woods here. So yeah, overall for his career, he had 4,638 rushing yards with the Giants. 39
with the Giants.
Yeah, with the Giants, and then had 39 touchdowns with the Giants as well. And stupid me forgot to write down his receiving yards. So I'm looking that up right now as we speak here because that was a thing back in the day. A lot of these guys, they took a lot more short passes out of the flats and everything as running backs. So yeah, for his career, 2,679 receiving yards and 17 receiving touchdowns. And it's kind of hard sometimes with these old school guys to go ahead and put in perspective how good they were when you look at stats, because the stats nowadays don't match up to the stats nowadays.
Well, so it's different games, so you can't it's hard to
exactly. So you can look at a guy like Alex Webster and go, okay, he had 4,600 yards. Well, Brandon Jacobs got 5,000 and he had more touchdowns. Why would you put him there? And the whole reason I'm suggesting this is because from 1955 to 1964 when he played, do you have a ghost in your room or something? Is there a ghost?
It's a poltergeist.
It sounds like a ghost in there. From that time period, Alex Webster had the 5th most rushing yards in the entire NFL. The 5th most. Brandon Jacobs was nowhere near the 5th most.
No.
Don't get me wrong. We got nothing but respect for Jacobs as a player there. But it's a different era. And in that era, Alex Webster was much more of a player that was like a Pro Bowl caliber year in, year out kind of player, whereas Brandon Jacobs just wasn't. Had great years, don't get me wrong, but wasn't the same kind of category as Alex Webster was at that point. And it's weird because you look at the numbers overall. We talked about it. Again, he never had 1,000-yard rushing for his career. Just kept trucking, just kept on going, and amassed a very good career with the Giants. And again, got one of the top one of the top teams ever for the New York Giants as well with the 1956 team. We talked about Connolly, the quarterback before. Now we're talking about Webster. We've made him talk about another running back here in a little bit from that same team as well. So it was a great team, and he was a big part about it. So yeah, number 6, Alex Webster. Well, again, somebody that some of us may have forgotten because he played literally 70 years ago is when he was drafted. 70 years ago. So, all righty, number 5. This is a guy that I think most of us will remember. If you're old like me, if you're old like me, at least I should say. It's funny because I say that kind of stuff, but if you're in your 20s or all, you might not know as much about this guy. So
be closer to 40 for this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Joe Morris, not to be confused with Philip Morris. He's not a smoker. He may smoke. I don't know. 2nd round pick in 1982. Played with the Giants from 82 to 88, and actually even came out of retirement and played for the Browns in 1991 for one head coach, Bill Belichick. Thought that was kind of interesting. He was out of the league for 3 years. They went back to play. 2-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro, 1-time Super Bowl champ with the New York Giants. Led the NFL in rushing TDs in 1985. See, now we're starting to get into the dominant guys. We're talking about guys, top 5 kind of guys, now an NFL leader. For his career with the New York Giants, 5,296 rushing yards, 48 rushing TDs, 884 receiving yards, 2 rushing TDs. Now, keep in mind, this is a guy who played with the Giants. We're talking for 7 seasons. So this isn't a guy who played for 10 years where you go, okay, at 500. No, he played 7 seasons. He had injuries. That's why he had to leave as well. So 85 to 88 was his really big heyday at that point. So he played, we're talking now, 4-year stretch. In that 4 years, he had 4,593 rushing yards. So that puts him over 1,100 yards per season right there. Those numbers in that stretch was 2nd most in the NFL to just Eric Dickerson. If you're going to lose to somebody in the 80s, you're muted, Rob.
We're going to lose someone. Dickerson's the guy to lose to. Sorry.
Exactly. He was probably the best running back of the 1980s. Eric Dickerson doesn't get enough credit for how good a player he was. But in that stretch, which again, we're talking 4 years, Joe Morris was the only guy in that same conversation as Eric Dickerson. He was that good. And obviously in that stretch was a certain 1986 campaign for the New York Giants, which was, of course, you could argue perhaps the best team ever that the New York Giants ever had, 1986.
That I mean, it's definitely in the
It's a
conversation.
debate. It's a debate.
In the
Don't get me
conversation.
wrong, but it's definitely a conversation worth having. Maybe a conversation we'll have another episode if we do the top. Ooh, see what I did?
Yeah.
More
Segue.
segues. More segues. Oh yeah, I
We
got
need more segues.
I got more segues than a tourist city. So again, Joe Morris, number 5. On to number 4, and this is going to be one of them. I broke the rules. I did. I break the rules. It happens.
We broke the rules.
But I broke the rules only what's current.
Which is a segue where I was going to go with. It's like,
So
is it really cheating if you don't project, you just say this is what has happened?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is because we're not projecting here at all. As we got a couple of comments here as well. Connor says Little Joe Morris, and Deb says loved watching Joe Morris. So number 4 is the current running back for the New York Giants, assuming that he actually signs his deal finally.
Yeah.
Saquon
He's
Barkley.
actually number 26, but whatever.
Saquon Barkley, second overall pick in 2018, played for the Giants from 2008 till about the second playoff game of last season.
Yeah.
2-time Pro Bowler, 2018 Offensive Rookie of the Year, both with the NFL and the PFWA. In his career so far, and this is why we say so far, and I have to include him in this kind of conversation, 4,249 rushing yards, 29 rushing touchdowns, 1,820 receiving yards, 8 receiving TDs, 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He's already matched Joe Morris in that category. He's only like 60 yards away from Joe Morris's yardage wise between when you combine the receiving and the rushing there.
Yeah, and what was his rookie year? How many yards did he get?
I think he had just shy of 2,000. I think 1,900
yards
overall.
What did he have rushing? That was what, 16?
Yeah, about that. I'd have to look it up to get the exact numbers.
And then this past year, what was he? 12, 13?
13.
Yeah, so you got 2,900 yards in 2 seasons.
Yeah,
plus receptions.
Yeah, and you have to include him in this conversation because of that. When he's already at these kind of numbers, that puts him in the list. If he retired today, hypothetically, we'd all cry a little. But he'd be on this list right where we're talking about. I'm not even doing projections of where he could be. Because if he's a healthy player, he could very well move up in front of some of the other players we're about to talk about here. But as of now, where he currently stands at the end of the 2022 season.
And, just
4.
think there was just about 2 years where he didn't play.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. And that's why I'm saying you can't have this conversation and not include Saquon Barkley in this here. I looked it up. Since 2018, when he entered the league, he's got the 11th most rushing yards. Keep in mind, he only had 34 yards in 2020. So he missed the whole season. And he's still just outside the top 10 in rushing yards since he's entered the league. That's pretty damn impressive.
And then ankle injury was week? The other time he was out of
because his second season. His second season, he had a couple of games. He was hobbling around. He was hurt this year as well. I mean, so again, this is a player that he's had his injuries, he's had his ups and downs, but his ups have been so good that you can't not include this guy on this list.
Yeah.
Can't. So, like I said, we can have a fun discussion even later on as far as where he could end up when he's done, because I'm telling you right now, I think he could end up at number 2 or 3. I don't think he'll beat number 1. I don't think
he would have to be healthy and stay quite a little bit longer.
Yes. Oh, yes. Alrighty. On to number 3. A player that has a special place in my heart, because obviously I grew up with the Big Blue Wrecking Crew in the 80s. But let's be honest, I was born in 82. I was a kid. I didn't know what the hell I was watching. I just knew my dad liked the Giants, so I'm watching the Giants. Like much of us my age. I wasn't going, oh, that's a good sweep run, or look, he hit the B gap there. Look, that was soft coverage at that point. That's why the guy caught the ball. Like, I didn't know what I was watching like that. when I really got into football was the early 90s. And in the early 90s, there was one man who was clearly head and shoulders the best player on offense. Let's be honest, he was.
Yeah.
He was. Rodney Hampton. First round pick in 1990. Played with the Giants from 1990 to 97. And I'm telling you right now, he could have played longer if it wasn't for the big injury he had towards the end, where it wasn't like time got to him and he retired because he was losing it. He had an injury, and that's why he started losing it. It wasn't like he was getting old or anything like that. Two-time Pro Bowler, one-time Super Bowl champ his rookie season in 1990, obviously. Five-time 1,000-yard rusher. That's impressive.
Incredible.
There's not many players who get that kind of career right there with that one stat alone. Now, obviously, they added him to the Ring of Honor this past season before the season started, and we talked about him a little then, but I'm going to relive this stat here because this stat is hella impressive.
Yes.
So, 1991 to 1995, okay, his 5-year stretch. We talk about the 5,000-yard rushing seasons. This is that stretch. In that stretch, he had the 4th most rushing yards in the entire NFL. The only people who beat him.
And it's pretty good company to be with.
Yeah.
Especially in the early 90s.
Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, 2 guys you could easily say are top 5 running backs of all time.
Yeah.
Thurman Thomas, who doesn't get enough credit for as good as he was for those Buffalo runs. He had 5,534 yards in that 5-season stretch. Only 5 players in the entire NFL had more than 4,200 yards.
Just ran them into the dust.
Keep in mind, he ran them into the dust with Dave Brown as his quarterback for many of those years. That's impressive. Nobody was worried about Dave Brown throwing the ball. Trust me on that, folks who aren't old enough to know these days.
I thought he was an honorable mention on Monday.
Oh, yeah, he was just dishonorable mention.
Yeah.
This is when you were playing the Giants back in those days, you didn't have a good quarterback. You had Dave Brown. You can look at some of the weapons, some of the offense and stuff and go, okay, what was left otherwise? They had okay receivers. Tight end, they had Howard Cross, who was basically an extra tackle. Don't get me wrong, hell of a blocking tight end. Not trying to take anything away from Howard Cross. He's got a place in Giants history because at the time, that's what the tight end position was
Pretty
for the most part. But it's almost like we talk now about Bellinger and Waller. And Bellinger was the Howard Cross, and Waller was the Bavaro. That was the kind of mix-up we had in those two. And Bavaro retired at this point, so there wasn't even that kind of thing going on. So there was nothing in offense. This was the offense, was run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. And Hampton wasn't the guy that's running the ball to the outside, getting swing routes, stuff like that. He was just running it up the gut. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing the entire time. And like I said, everybody wanted to try to stop him, but they couldn't. He was just that good. You knew what he was going to do. You knew what the Giants were going to do, and you couldn't stop him. That's why Rodney Hampton, right here on the board, He's somewhere in this here as well.
He's right here on my imagination board.
Rodney Hampton's also somewhere over here as well. So is Joe Morris. And so is somebody else that we're going to talk about next in a minute here. And the person after that is also there as well. But again, the guy that I'm actually worried that he's going to go the route of a Ron Johnson eventually. And people will forget how good Rodney Hampton was because of the era he played in. So those of you that are too young to remember him, go YouTube Rodney Hampton. And if we come up with this video again, that means you have to share this video.
Definitely like and subscribe.
Exactly. Next up, number 2, Frank Gifford. Hall of Fame, Frank Gifford. Not to be confused with Kathy Lee Gifford. That was his wife. So 11th overall pick in 2000 in 1952.
So
this guy was drafted before any of our parents were born. That's how old school we're kicking this one back now. So
he was alive for World War II.
Yeah, played with the Giants from 1952 to 1962, and then also came back and played in 1964. And for those who are kind of curious why he came back to play, he had actually some injury issues later on in his career. He switched out for the last couple of years from a running back to a receiver because he had that kind of talent. He was that kind of flexible in the field. So he played free safety in 52 and 53. He threw 63 passes in his career. He kicked 7 field goals and 11 extra points. He returned punts. He returned kickoffs. And again, his last two seasons, 62 and 64, he played wide receiver. I don't know about the cigarette part, but Charlie did. He was a Marlboro man. But like this is talk about that old school kind of mentality and the old school method, and it's a different time. So it's hard to look at his stats necessarily and talk about him in comparison to more of these modern day guys. He'll never have the one flashy season or 2 flashy seasons like Saquon had.
But Saquon will also never be kicking the field goal.
No, I'd love to see that. Actually, if he was the punter, I'd be happy. Get rid of the Scottish hammer. So Frank Gifford for his career was an 8-time Pro Bowler, 6 times as a running back. He was a 4-time first team All-Pro. On his career, 3,609 rushing yards, 34 rushing TDs. Now, you would sit there and say, wow, that's not that impressive at all. And if you compare to modern times, no, it's not. But now you have to add in the fact that, again, the position was different back then. It was a halfback position. It wasn't the running back that you think of nowadays. And the reason I can show that very easily is this. 5,434 yards receiving, 43 receiving TDs. So keep in mind, back then, and we talked about this before, we talked about Alex, these guys were taking passes, short passes. Back then, throwing the ball down the field just didn't happen like it does nowadays. You threw a bunch of dink and dunk quick routes, like almost like everybody ran a West Coast offense.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
Frank Gifford, again, guy started playing for us 70 years ago. He is third most all-time in all-purpose yards in Giants history, behind only the man we'll talk about in a moment, so I won't give that name up yet, and Amani Toomer. Third all-time. You guys still want to talk about OBJ? This guy hasn't played for us in 70 years. And OBJ didn't get even close to his numbers. 9th most rushing yards in Giants history. 3rd most receiving yards in Giants history. Was 2nd most all-purpose yards. So I looked it up this way. All-purpose yards because, again, the way he played. So from 1954 to 1959, which was his best years, he was the 2nd most all-purpose yards in the entire NFL. Ollie Matson had 8,639 in that time period. Frank Gifford had 6,109. So again, huge difference between 1 and 2. But after that, not a single player had more than 5,500 yards. That's how good Frank Gifford was for the New York Giants. And again, you're talking about the 1956 championship team, which if you notice what that time frame we just talked about was, 1956 was smack dab in the middle of that. We also talked about all the failed NFL championship games for the Giants as well. Frank Gifford was part of all of those as well. And I hate to say it failed, but hey, they still got to the NFL championship game almost every single season in the late 50s like that. That's what the Giants were all about. They were good enough to get there. They just had trouble getting that last game. So, Frank Gifford obviously has a special place in NFL history as well, because of the fact that he went on to be an announcer for Monday Night Football and all afterwards. Can't say enough about what that man meant to Giants history. And
like I said, NFL in general.
Yeah. I mean, the guy was, again, a pioneer in the sport at the time to go into broadcasting afterwards. Again, obviously, you don't want to talk too much as far as this part of it there, but there's an intermingling of the Hollywood thing as well because of who he married. He married Kathy Lee Gifford. I mean, the woman's still on TV. Obviously, there was a huge age gap between the two, but Kathy Lee Gifford would talk about Frank nonstop as well, and that kind of kept him in people's memory as well. When I was growing up in the 80s and all, after he was done playing football and done announcing for Monday Night Football. So the guy was basically in the nation's ears for, 40 years or so until she quit that show. So, a long time career as a Giant, a long time career as an overall celebrity in general, and an ambassador to the sport and an ambassador to the New York Giants.
Yeah, he definitely helped change the whole athlete to Hollywood. Get out there. Oh, yeah. Rock, give your kudos.
Yeah, I mean, you could even say Strahan. Without him, would there be Strahan?
Well, I'm saying that, but I mean, look at even WWE. The Rock, biggest actor now.
That's not a sport.
It's sports entertainment. I'm just saying, I'm
way. Out of the entertainment and crossing out the sports part. All right, on to numero uno, the big cheese, the head honcho of the list. One, a Tim Kiambu Barber, also known as Tiki Barber.
The Tiki.
Second round draft pick in 1997 out of Virginia. Played from 1997 to 2006 and could have played much longer. He was still at the very much the top of his game when he quit, guys. And he's still number one on the list. He probably could have played for 2-3 more years if he wanted to. I think that's not even stretching it, because he was still one of the best running backs in all of football when he retired. So rumor was he was doing a commercial with Curtis Martin, who was just at this point also ending his career as well. And it was for McDonald's. And the two of them were, obviously the big running backs in New York at the time. Obviously one is at the Hall of Fame now. One should be. We'll get to that in a second. And he saw how Curtis Martin struggled to do most things because of his knees at this point. Curtis Martin already announced he was going to be done playing football. And Tiki said, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And he walked away.
Yeah.
That's, again,
very smartly.
I haven't heard him ever tell that story, but that's the story I remember being told when he retired. And you say very smart, but he's made a lot of bad moves personally in his life. I'll put it that way. But
well, yeah. Well, I'm saying
from bashing Eli, and the second he got out of the Giants to, I believe he left his wife when she was pregnant and all. So I mean, there's other personal issues there as well.
I didn't say he was smart overall. I'm just saying he was smart enough to get out while he was still young enough to enjoy his health to make other bad decisions.
I get it. I mean, but he also retired 1 year too early. He could have got a ring.
He could have.
Got a ring. He could have been a contender.
He could have been wearing that ring that he lost.
So, most all-purpose yards in Giants history. Most rushing yards in Giants history. Second most rushing touchdowns in Giants history. Second most receptions in Giants history. Fourth most receiving yards in Giants history. You notice a theme going here.
He has some Giant stats.
He's got some Giant stats there. So 3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time All-Pro, 10,449 rushing yards, 55 touchdowns, 5,183 receiving yards, 12 receiving touchdowns, 6 1,000-yard rushing seasons. Second most rushing yards in the entire league from 2002 to 2006. Now, what year did I say he retired? 2006. He literally ended his career on the biggest high note of his career, basically. Most receiving yards by a running back in that time as well. So not just the second most rushing yards, but the most receiving yards. He was the best running back in the entire NFL in the early 2000s. I'm going to call like that flat out. People can debate me all they want. I'm calling it. the best running back in that time frame. One of only 4 players in NFL history with 5,000 rushing and 5,000 receiving yards to this day. How the hell is this man not in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, that's
His brothers didn't even.
NFL doesn't like the Giants.
They do not. The Pro Bowl, I was the NFL Hall of Fame does not like the Giants. 100%. 100%. I'm telling you, we're gonna have a whole episode on Giants who should be in the Hall of Fame and are not. It's gonna happen at some point this offseason. Because every single time we cover one of these guys, it just pisses me off.
You know, it really grinds my gears.
This does. It grinds my gears. Yeah. All right. We got a couple of other comments here. So Deb says, you guys are babies, LOL. I've got 30 years on you. Connor says, Tiki time. And
Tiki
Deb
time.
says, didn't he have problems holding on to the ball but made the correction? And yes, 100%.
Correct.
He was a fumbling machine. Basically, his first
still put up
couple of
those
years.
stats.
But what the crazy part is, once they fixed it, it was fixed.
Yeah.
Once it was fixed, it was fixed. Like, he was not the fumbler in any way, shape, or form.
See, you should listen to Otis because he did this way too much instead of this.
No, the biggest problem with him, if I remember correctly, was
he was one-handed when he was running. He didn't secure the ball,
running. Exactly,
especially when he went up through the line.
And they would come from behind and just punch it out. Yep. So one thing I'll challenge Giant fans, NFL fans in general to look at is I want you to compare the career of Marshall Faulk, who we talked about earlier here. Marshall Faulk, who was obviously great with the Colts, great with the Rams, and I want you to compare the stats he had there. So he played for 12 seasons as opposed to the 10 seasons that Tiki played for. So we talked about this before. Tiki Barber at about 10,500 yards. So, he had about 1,050 a season, we'll call it. In the 12 years that Marshall Faulk played, he had 12,279 yards. So about the same there as far as per year. In his career, again, Tiki had 5,183 receiving yards. Marshall Faulk had 6,875 with 2 more years. And yet Marshall Faulk is in the Hall of Fame and Tiki Barber is not. Now, I will say this. So one of the big differences is the TD totals there, because Marshall Faulk had 100 for his career. So Tiki Barber had 55. That's a pretty massive difference there. But we should also include, when we talk about that, the fact that Marshall Faulk played on one of the best offenses in the history of the NFL. The absolute history of the NFL, with that greatest show on turf with the Rams back in the day. Whereas Tiki Barber played with Danny Cannell. Just saying. Rookie Eli Manning. I mean, again, I'm a huge Eli Manning guy, obviously. That goes without saying. I think any Giant who's not is not really a Giants fan. But 04, 05,
he looked like that toddler trying to walk.
He was a little brutal.
Yeah.
So
there were some games where you're like, oh, he's going. This looks great. And there's other games where he was crawling to get past that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, besides the years with Kerry Collins, that wasn't the greatest offenses in the world that he was playing with there. So, again, I think if Marshall Faulk is in, which he is already, then there's no doubt in mind that Tiki Barber should also be in the Hall of Fame. And it's an absolute travesty it's not. And I think part of it is because he's not the most liked guy in NFL circles. I do think that's part of it.
True.
We talked about some of his personal issues. I don't want to get too much into stuff that I can't judge because I'm not around for. I actually did meet him once.
Did you?
It's not the greatest story like yours was.
I was about to say, it's Otis Anderson.
So my father took me to the Big Blue Travel Company. For those who are aware of what they are, they basically do travel packages for people to go to away games and stuff like that. They also hold like big tailgating events at hotels nearby to the stadium and then bus you over for the game. So that kind of stuff. They did an end of the year party in 1998 when the Giants won the NFC East. This was the Danny Cannell year that they won the NFC East. And the event was actually hosted by Mike and the Mad Dog. And Jim Fossil was there. John Fox was there. And then player-wise, Tiki Barber was there. So was Charles Way, Danny Cannell, Scott Gregg, Roman Oben, Jason Sehorn was there as well. And I feel like I'm missing somebody else, but I don't think
Ray Finkel?
No, Ray Finkel was not there. At least he's out. But yeah, I did get a glimpse of meeting Tiki Barber, as he also met like 5,000 people that day, though. But like I said,
you'd like, look. You see, I recognize that taller guy.
One of the greatest Giants of all time, and doesn't get nearly that kind of credit because of the fact of who he is after he's done playing. We got to really know Tiki, and some people just don't like Tiki.
Yeah, he was pretty quiet as a Giants from what I recall, but as soon as he stepped out, he just gave everyone the Jersey bird. Oh yeah, and he's now on The Fan, I believe, as I think it's Tiki and Turney. Isn't that the name of the show now? I think so, because I know he's been in broadcasting, but WFAN New York. I missed the schmooze when he was on. He was awesome. Guy had a cool voice. But yeah, like I said, it's a guy that I'm hoping that eventually fans will let bygones be bygones on, and he'll have his proper status he deserves, because he is the greatest running back to ever play for the New York Giants. You could easily, I think, also make the case that he is potentially the best offensive weapon the Giants ever had. Outside of the realm of quarterback. That's why I'm saying offensive weapon. Because obviously if you're picking any player to start, you're picking Eli Manning number one. Because the quarterback is clearly the most important position. But again, all-purpose yards leader, receiving leader, second in TDs, second in receptions, fourth in receiving yards. He wasn't even a running back, and he's fourth best total of receiving yards, second best reception total in Giants history. Which is going to make the next time we do this list seem really pitiful. We talk about the greatest wide receivers. Pretty much. Put Tiki on there for the hell of it. This is where Tiki stands. I mean, honestly, I was really, when we're talking about Frank Gifford, I was kind of like, where do we put him? Because he did play both positions, but he was primarily a running back. That's why he ended up on this list. But I was like, do we put him as a receiver? Do we put him on both? Like, where do we go with this? Like, maybe just cut in the middle of segue, like, between 3 and 4. Before 3, but Deb also says there was a controversy when LT was nominated for the Hall of Fame because of his personal life. They need to separate that out for Tiki as well. And you have to. Like, I feel like we're not there to judge him as a player like that. And technically, if you want, it's not judging him as a player, it's judging as a person. Yes, a person. I meant, But beyond that, there's no like NFL related issues. It wasn't like he was Barry Bonds and juicing in the dugout. Oops, did I say that? I did not say he did that. That's the hearsay. That's hearsay. Don't sue us, Barry. As he lost like a whole bunch of his championships. It's not like he's like, Reggie Bush losing his Heisman or anything like that. Like, there was no like football controversy with him. He just said some things people didn't like. He's entitled to his opinion in the end. I mean, outside of sports, you look at Richard Pryor, is one of the best comedians ever. No one says anything else because he pretty much caught himself on fire smoking some crack. But I think it was like that. He talked trash about Eli right before Eli won the championship. So, like, bad timing. Bad timing. Or maybe it was fuel for Eli. I don't know. And then on top of that, not too long after that was the whole him leaving his pregnant wife thing and losing his contract with NBC Sports, I think it was, because the woman he left her for worked for him, if I remember correctly. I think it was something along those lines. So, and listen, again, I'm not going to judge that kind of stuff either, because for all we know, they had a horrible marriage and stuff like that should have ended years ago. Like, we don't know the scenario. How are we going to judge something like that? That's between him and his wife and ex-wife, whatever the case may be. I don't know I think he married the woman
eventually that he did leave his wife for. But whatever, that's between them. It doesn't involve us.
I don't know.
I could
I don't
not
really
care
pay that
less.
much attention.
I could not care less. Listen, it's not like he's pulling a Dave Meggett, who's still in jail for abusing women and stuff like that. So, we'll probably talk about Dave Meggett at some point. We talk about the greatest special teamers, and we'll have to kind of include that because that's a legit serious claim. What the stuff that went against him is multiple women. Tiki Barber just cheated on his wife. If you start kicking people out of the Hall of Fame for cheating on their wife, oh my God, it's going to be a rather empty building. Maybe some other Giants will finally get in. Phil Simms, pack your bags.
We're going in.
No man who parts his hair on the side like that would ever cheat his wife.
And wears loafers and khakis.
Exactly. That's be the last guy you would think would do that. Connor says here as well, he says, Tiki is the man. Don't care what all the half-ass fans say. Then original beast mode, Brandon Jacobs and Joe Morris. Are you forgetting Frank Gifford already, Connor?
He's a youngin'. He was...
Nope.
Then he was...
Connor gave his age before. He wasn't Frank Gifford age at that point, but he was.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, he was much closer at that point to that than we are. So
don't add some age to him. Come on.
I'm not adding the age, but it's be kind of like us talking about Ron Johnson. It'd be like that'd be the comparison for him.
I hear you, man. Just saying.
I'm just saying. Don't forget the man. The man was a great Giant. Alrighty, guys. So tomorrow we're going to be on live again. We're going to go ahead and do another OTA update for you guys here, an OTA update here, because we know you guys are all into it, and we want to give you guys the news that's actually news and not stretch out each and every single one to another BS episode like the other guys out there. I'll put it that way without naming any specific names. But a little bit happens each workout. So we want to give you guys the updates, but again, we don't want to be like, oh, Daniel Jones, his shoes were loose, and
oh my God, he had
Kadarius Toney and
touchdowns.
Yeah, it's like the big news coming out now. I even give you guys is the fact that the Giants offense hasn't thrown an interception. I should say they're saying is he hasn't had the Giants offense hasn't had a turnover since the first day of OTAs, and they're all applauding the offense. Well, guess what? That also means the defense is getting any turnovers.
I was going to say there's a yin to the yang there.
So everything is overblown in these time of days. So we're going to look at what's going on. We're going to give you guys the news that we actually think is important to these last couple of days. Today was actually a media session as well. So it wasn't just the Giants spoon feeding us information. The actual media was there today to give us their thoughts on everything. So we'll be back with you guys there tomorrow night doing that. We'll be back again next week as well. We're going to start doing some other stuff as well. So like I said, it's the off season. It's the time period we gotta think of fun ways to entertain you guys without giving you again the shoelace tying stories and stuff like that. So we have another idea for doing a possible Q&A here, so we're gonna probably do one of those coming up soon as well. We're also gonna of course continue our series on the greatest of positions as well. So next up will be wide receiver. So we'll probably do that one on Monday or Wednesday there. So guys, best way to find out though when these new episodes come out, the little subscribe button. The subscribe. Hit the like,
bell
hit
on YouTube.
Hit the bell on YouTube, exactly. Ring our bell. Every time you ring a bell, Rob gets his wings. It's a Red Bull wing though, it goes away.
Oh.
So of course, guys, we are as always streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and my LinkedIn profile. We're, of course, available on all the platforms afterwards as well, except for Twitch, because I still got to figure out Twitch and why it keeps deleting our episodes when they're done. But we are also available, of course, on every single audio platform. That usually goes up about an hour or so after the original live show goes on. That's available on all the Apple Podcasts there. Rob has his Apple shirt on.
Grapple.
And Grapple. So the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon. And again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening in with us here today as we go through our historical journey through Giants history here. Oh, yes.
Oh. Oh yes.
I feel like getting a leather helmet on for one of these episodes. That'd be kind of fun.
We should, right? This little
We
cat.
should. If I have one lying around, I would. I actually looked into getting one for the wall. People who have those things want to charge ridiculous amount of money. They want to charge $80. It's a piece of leather. I'm about to make my own.
Yeah.
They go to Tandy Leather, go make my own. If those people who go to cons, they know Tandy Leather. Tandy Leather, literally all they do is sell you leather and like leather cutting tools and stuff like that, so you can make like con stuff. All the major cities have one. I'm sure Jersey has one. Sure Jersey has one. Tampa has one. Alrighty, guys. Again, appreciate everybody listening in. Again, thank you to our sponsor, Deb. We do appreciate you sponsoring the show here today. Again, guys, if you would also like to get a a thank you and a free sticker from us, that's where you do it. Right there.
Right there.
Go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/2giantgoofballs. Again, it's buymeacupofcoffee.com/2giantgoofballs. And also anybody else who's listening who has supported us in the past that way as well. Again, same as I know Deb's already given me her address in Messenger. I can see that. We will go ahead and send you a sticker as well if you just send the address as well, because I have a bunch of stickers here. So let's start getting rid of some stickers here.
Let's go.
Like I said, it's a nice way of saying thank you, because we do appreciate you guys listening in and supporting the show, commenting along.
Yeah, means a lot.
Building the goofball community here. It does. It really does mean a lot. It's awesome to see the same people in, episode out. It means it's not just us that cares about the Giants as well. It's all y'all as well. So the show isn't anything without the people listening. It's like that whole, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's listening, doesn't make a sound. Listen,
it talks about the Giants is what it does.
If Rob falls out of his chair and no one listens, doesn't make a sound.
It's because my microphone is on mute.
All righty, folks. Again, appreciate everybody listening in. We'll see you guys there tomorrow night. Talk about the OTA update. And as always, Giant fans,
go G-Man!
Go G-Man!
Thanks for listening to Two Giant Goofballs, a New York Giants podcast. We appreciate your support. If you made it this long, you must have enjoyed it. So I am sure you have followed us on all the social media platforms. Of course, you have subscribed to the show on your favorite app as well and given us a top rating. Right? Right? Right?